I wanted to bring out the seriousness with which we looked at the Arabic world in the 19th century for clues for modern design. So there were architects who felt something has got to give. We've got to find a fresh new source for our design, for our architecture. And where did they go in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s? Where did they go but to the Middle East? It's hard for us to understand because today of the politics, etc., but this is one of the things I have to emphasize. In order to realize how the 19th century looked at the Middle East, you have to set aside the last 100 years. You have to put out of your mind the politics, all the religious fanaticism, all the craziness that's gone on these last 100 years, these last 30 years. Just to get that out of your mind. We are going back to the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. We're going back to a time when the Middle East had been forgotten for 400 years, for 300 years by the West. Westerners are reawakening to the Middle East. They are fascinated by the Middle East. And for the next 100 years, from the 1820s to the 1920s, the Middle East was basically the Shangri-La for the Western world. If you wanted to find yourself, if you wanted some kind of influence for your art, for your sculpture, for your music, for your poetry, you would go to the Middle East. Interesting, by the 1910s and 20s, the Bohemians of the Western world, they shift their focus, and from then till now, where do they go? The Himalayas. They go to Tibet, they go to Bhutan, they go sit on top of a mountain somewhere in the Himalayas. You know, whether it's a Bohemian from Greenwich Village in 1920 or the Beatles in the 1960s or someone from the media today, they go to the Himalayas. But for 100 years, it was the Middle East. And the Middle East for Europeans was an open door, an open sesame. It was a way of discovering a different kind of life, completely different kind of life from the rigid, stratified European society and the rigid, stratified European neoclassical system. On the upper left, Drayton Hall. Again, your typical neoclassical Palladian formula house. In the Palladian formula, from the 1500s to the early 1800s, you had a portico, you had a veranda. You could have your veranda any which way you wanted as long as it was in the front, in the dead center of the building. That was it. And of course, what was the purpose of the veranda in a neoclassical house like this? This was an aristocrat's house, and the aristocrat would come out on the upper part of the veranda to address the peasants, you know, us, basically. And they would, you know, wave their handkerchief and say how much they loved us, you know, but just don't come too near me, you know, but we love you, and just don't get any French ideas and revolt, you know, but you know, stay nice and calm. And then he'd go back in the house with the Duchess and have tea. Well, when you get to the 19th century, Americans get into verandas in a big way. They are very Middle Eastern about the way they use verandas. You're looking at the Mark Twain house. Again, it's at Hartford, built in the 1870s. Beautiful veranda on the ground floor, beautiful and sweeping, but on the upper floor, almost every bedroom has a different kind of veranda, porch, loggia, whatever you want to call it. Here on the lower right, you're looking at Mark Twain's own room in the upper part of his house with his own veranda adjacent to a different type of veranda, a real balcony off of one of the other bedrooms. Again, very much like the Middle Easterners, we Americans use verandas to let the interior space pop out wherever it needs to, not where the neoclassical formula dictates that it's supposed to. All of this leads us to one of the most brilliant houses, I think, that was done in America in the 19th century, Olana. Take a trip one day. It's right up on the Hudson River in Hudson, New York, right below Albany. It's a wonderful house. Frederick Church, who was he was the owner of the house. He had this built. He had Calvert Vaux build it, but Calvert Vaux always said that Frederick Church was the architect. Now, Calvert Vaux was a very English guy, so you know he was very modest. He would, oh, not me, never me, you know, that kind of thing. But he himself probably helped Frederick Church a great deal. Frederick Church and his family had now this was built in the mid-1870s. In the 1860s, they went to the Middle East. He and his family, Frederick Church and his family, they visited Jerusalem, Beirut, and Damascus. Can you imagine if we could do that today and not have to deal with all this nonsense? I mean, this is why I can't stand what goes on in the Middle East. The churches came back and they glorified in the Arabic idea of a simple interior and an informal, relaxed lifestyle. Frederick Church was an artist. He wanted a bohemian house, a bohemian interior. He builds his Moorish Victorian palace on the hills overlooking the Hudson River. You notice, of course, the multicolored block technique construction in brick and stone. And when you turn around, you realize the light that brilliantly shines into this space. Where does it come from? Again, remember, Frederick Church was a Hudson River School painter. Turn around and look what you see. This glorious, glorious veranda framed in an Arabic arch with this magnificent view of the Hudson River Valley. It may be a very different geography from the Middle East, but the lightness, the openness, if you look on the side here, the difference between Bramante Tempietto and the Dome of the Chain, the light, airy, open feeling that the Arabs in the Middle East gave their interiors, gave their buildings, opened their buildings up to the outside where they could. This kind of thing is what attracted Frederick Church. It's what attracted Owen Jones and the other bohemians of the time. It harks back to a time when the Arabic world, the Middle East, it was a place to open up our imaginations, to let our imaginations roam, and really to give us an alternate lifestyle to the rigidities and the formalities of the European and American world. It really was a fascinating period in our history, and out of it came modern ideas of design we still live with today. It really shows you why there is a very, very strong story there to be told about New York and Orientalism. Thank you very much.